Good afternoon and Happy New Year to everyone today. I hope everyone had a good and safe holiday. 2020 was a challenging year to say the least, but Missourians met these challenges with strength, determination, and common sense. We still had many great accomplishments despite the challenges, and we look forward to the new opportunities in 2021 will bring us. I do want to say today, before I start off in the rest of the briefing, I had a chance to go to a prayer service out at the Baptist Church here in town, at Concord Baptist Church. And John Nelson was one of the speakers up there this morning, and he talked about truth, that we all have an obligation to tell the truth. We as leaders, you as the media, and how we construct that. And I thought it was a wonderful message, and I want to thank the Concord Baptist Church for starting each year off with a prayer service and encouraging all of us to do better. Also, I want to thank Monty Schinkel, who is the pastor out there, for putting that together year after year. But it was a good message, a good way to start the year and start this session. Before we get started with COVID-19 updates, we have several pieces of good news to share regarding higher education, child care, and the state budget. Today, we're excited to announce $68 million in federal funding for capital improvement and infrastructure projects at Missouri's public universities as well as state tech. These are shovel-ready projects and will put people back to work in a short order. Public universities play a major role in their local communities, and this has never been more clear than during the COVID-19 crisis. Higher education institutions have offered up facilities and faculty for ultra-cold vaccine storage, contributed to the state's PPE supply chain, and provided job training for unemployed Missourians. And these funds will help provide much-needed support to our public universities. In addition to these funds, we are also excited to announce $4 million in CARES Act child care development funds to St. Louis Community College in Forest Park to expand child care capacity for students, faculty, and the local communities. Access to quality child care is critical for working families. With this funding, St. Louis Community College will be able to offer on-site child care for the first time by repurposing existing space into a 15,000 square foot facility that will serve up to 60 children at any given time. This facility will be crucial to ensuring children remain safe and educated while parents receive training for high-demand jobs. Today, we are also releasing nearly $127 million previously restricted from the 2021 budget, including nearly $26 million for the Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development. We're also releasing $1.5 million to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The remainder includes funding for several departments, including the Office of Administration, Department of Agriculture, the Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Economic Development, the Department of Public Safety, the Department of Mental Health, the Department of Health and Senior Services, and the Department of Social Service. Thanks to our Show Me Strong recovery plan, we continue to outpace our economic recovery forecast, which is why we are able to release these funds today. This is great news for our state and the economy, and we will continue to evaluate our budget and spending as we move forward into the new year. On the COVID-19 front, we continue to make steady progress with vaccines. Missouri is still ahead of the majority of the states on our vaccine distribution plan. Over 105,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccine have now been administered in the state of Missouri. This is not including those administered through the Federal Pharmacy Partnership, such as nursing homes. We anticipate receiving an adequate supply of vaccines by the end of January to complete Phase 1A. This week, we expect to receive another shipment of approximately 37,000 Pfizer vaccine and 36,000 of the Moderna vaccine. We know we now have 351 approved vaccine providers across the state, including 344 Phase 1A and 1B providers. We know that many Missourians are still wondering when they will be able to receive COVID-19 vaccine. We are working through our vaccine plan as quickly and efficiently as possible, but it is important to remember that the current demand for the vaccine is much greater than the supply. Once we feel we are close to completing Phase 1A, then Phase 1B will begin. This is a gradual and ongoing process, and we will continue to communicate with the public about phases and vaccine availability. In the meantime, we still strongly encourage everyone to visit our vaccine website, mostopscovid.com, for the latest updates and information. Again, mostopscovid.com. As you know, today is the first day of the 2021 legislative session, and I welcome the General Assembly back to the Capitol and look forward to working with them for the people of the state of Missouri. We are also excited to be just a few short days away from a historic bicentennial inauguration. Missouri has faced many challenges in 200 years. But just as Missourians always do, our state has overcome these challenges and continue to move forward. It is an honor to be part of this historic event and an honor to serve as the 57th governor of the state of Missouri. Thank you, and God bless. We also have Commissioner Zora Mulligan here today to answer questions on the education side of some of the things, some announcements I made today. Dr. Williams is also here today to answer a few questions, and I think we'll take a little more time today. I know a lot of you are here today. It's the first day of session. A lot of things happening out there. I'll try to take some extra time to answer a few more questions today as we move forward. So with that, Kelly, you want to get Zora?
Hello and good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here to cover this big day for higher education and workforce development in Missouri. So I'll start by letting you know that there's complete information about the expenditure restrictions released today at the Office of Administration's Budget and Planning website. That includes $9.2 million being released for the community colleges across Missouri, as well as significant additional funds for our public universities. I wanted to highlight specifically some of the expenditure restrictions being released to focus on the maintenance and repair projects that the governor mentioned earlier. I'm delighted to participate in this announcement, and I am very, very grateful to Governor Parson for his continued commitment to this critical component of Missouri's education and workforce development infrastructure, which is our physical facilities at our public university campuses. Early in my higher education career, I visited every college and university in the state of Missouri to take a look at their facilities. And what I saw was some of the best and some of the worst. And I can tell you that there's some of the worst on every campus in the state of Missouri. The worst ranges from leaking roofs to brick that needs to be tuck-pointed, old windows that bleed heat, and outdated electrical systems. We have campuses that have boilers that are so old there's only one person left on campus who knows how to fix them. And we have campuses where miles and miles of ancient steam tunnels run under campus, and I can tell you that they're definitely showing their age. Many of the projects that schools will tackle with the funds that are being released today have been on their deferred maintenance list since I was on the campus back in 2009. This work is very expensive, and it's hard to accomplish during times of decreased or flat funding for colleges and universities. The last major investment in this kind of infrastructure was in 2014, when then Senator Mike Parson championed a major piece of legislation that authorized bonding to support improvements at our college and universities campuses, as well as on public buildings throughout the state. Taking care of an old building may not seem as exciting as putting up a new one, but it's an investment in the future, and it's an essential act of stewardship. The buildings that will be invested in as a result of today's announcement are public buildings. They were built in the 19th and 20th centuries to serve the people of Missouri, and caring for them now will allow them to stand into the 21st century and beyond. I'd also like to briefly comment on the $4 million announcement regarding St. Louis Community College's Forest Park campus to expand their child care facilities. Our friends at the Department of Social Services were an important part of this endeavor, and so I want to extend huge thanks to them as well as to Governor Parson. This is the 6th time in less than 6 months that Governor Parson has made a major investment in child care facilities at our state's public colleges and universities. Back in October, he announced investments at Harris Stowe State University in St. Louis, Northwest Missouri State University in Maryville, OTC in Springfield, S&T in Rolla, and Missouri Southern State University in Joplin. With today's announcement, the state will have invested almost $10 million in expanding child care facilities on college campuses. There is no way to describe this other than huge. If you take back a step from your journalism hat and think about your parent hat, you know that child care is very, very hard to find, and that was true even before COVID exacerbated this crisis. We also know that parents who are finally ready to take the huge step and go back to school really need access to quality child care facilities. So these funds will go a long way toward helping us achieve our basic goal in terms of workforce development, which is getting more Missourians in the workforce and having them be more productive because of access to training and higher education. This project at St. Louis Community College Forest Park is also particularly exciting because of kind of where it is and who it serves. Students who go to St. Louis Community College Forest Park study lots and lots of different things, but one of their major areas of focus is healthcare. If you've seen the Forest Park campus, you know that it's right across the highway from a major healthcare complex in St. Louis. Students who graduate from these healthcare programs go on to serve the workforce throughout the St. Louis region, and as well as those in their own backyard. So supporting students in these programs is another element of a long-term investment in our state's healthcare system. So I'll close simply by reiterating my thanks to Governor Parson and the Department of Social Services, and by expressing excitement about what the future holds for the state of Missouri. I would say from my perspective, we're on the right path, and we're moving forward with courage and speed. Thank you very much. And now I'm available to take any questions you might have.
Any specific buildings that are going to be fixed up that you could share with us, we might know?
Sure. So we've had preliminary conversations with the public universities and State Tech about the specific needs they would address. We're finalizing that list, and we'll be happy to share it with you once it's complete. Thank you very much.
Dr. Williams? Thanks, Kelly, and it's good to see everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Last night before I went to bed, I had 19 media requests, and so I tried to synthesize them so I could answer your questions. Many of them were similar. So first thing I want to do is start off by thanking Missourians who continue to follow the guidelines that we would hope. We were 15th this morning when I woke up for cases per 100,000 for the last 7 days, according to the CDC. And our case rate, while increased, is remaining steady and is down from what it was. We continue to watch hospitalizations very closely. As you know, they remain increased, but as we look across the state, we are again appreciative of overall the fact that our R0, while still up, is at 1.1, that we're still in a very stable situation. The second thing that people are very interested in, as the governor said, is our rollout of 1A, our healthcare workers in long-term care facility. So let me explain that. As you know, we had committed the Moderna vaccine to our long-term care facilities. We anticipate that we will be finished with that in about another 10 days, that they will have received all of that allocation. We're incredibly appreciative to CVS and Walgreens and the other independent pharmacies. And just find it amazing that 100% of all the 1,300 long-term care facilities in Missouri have signed up. The response we're getting from them is very encouraging about people being vaccinated. And again, that's so incredibly important to us because, as you know, as I've said before, while they may make up about 4% of the cases, it's almost 40% of the morbidity and mortality that affects our hospitals. And they're clearly a very vulnerable population. So once that Moderna is freed up, you heard the governor say about 37,000 doses each week, we will shift that into the remainder of 1A. And so right now we're using our Pfizer to reach out to our healthcare facilities. Of the top 50 healthcare facilities by census bed, all of those, I believe, now have been vaccinated. We have 50 more that have signed up, and we'll very quickly move to those with more Pfizer and the Moderna as it becomes available next week. And then, as the governor said, we'll spend the remainder of January working through the remainder of those healthcare. It becomes more challenging once you get away from hospital systems and you get into family docs and pediatricians and nurses and Worth County and Sedalia and places like that. It just becomes logistically more challenging, but I know Robert Nodell, who's leading our efforts, is incredibly committed to that, and I know the governor is too, that no matter where you are in Missouri, if you're helping take care of people, we want to make sure that we help you. And so we'll move through that. The third question you've brought up is Phase 1B. We will be announcing the stratification of that next week. And incredibly appreciative to Rob Dixon, who's leading those efforts, but it's incredibly collaborative. Certainly from a clinical standpoint, Dr. T and I have been looking at that. As you know, there are kind of numerous guidelines clinically about what patients would be most eligible as far as comorbidities and age. And so I was on a conference call with ASTO this morning looking at that. And we will give that to you next week because I know that's a question very much on people's minds. In that universe of 3 million of 1B, how will they be tiered and how will that roll out and how will you be eligible and how will you know to get your vaccine? And we will be giving you that information next week. Final thing I want to discuss real quickly that's on your mind is the UK variant. 5 states have had patients with that now, 33 countries. Missouri has not, to our knowledge, and let me elaborate on that. Bill Whitmore, who's president of the American Public Health Laboratory Association, has gone back through November and looked at all the samples that we've done in the state lab since then. That's about 500 a day, and nobody tested positive. Starting last week, we're checking every sample we do every day at the state lab for that, and as of this morning, we've had no positives. I was on a phone call bright and early this morning with my good buddy Lee Norman in Kansas. Neither have they. But it brings to bear that the UK variant, as I've seen some of you report, is 50% more infectious than the normal variant. It has a higher viral load. It is more sticky, if you would say. So it just brings to bear again, as the governor keeps saying, that even though we have the vaccine rolling out, we're 19th in the country for the number of people who've been vaccinated. At this moment in time in January, we really need everybody to social distance, to wear masks, to use hand sanitizer, and just be real thoughtful about how you congregate, especially indoors here in the winter. So with that, Kelly, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Dr. Williams? Jacqueline?
Hi, Dr. Williams.
Hey, Jacqueline.
I wanted to touch on the timeline. I know that that's changing probably on a day-to-day basis,
Yeah.
but because there have been fewer vaccines than expected, you have said that anyone who wants to get a vaccine in Missouri is likely to get one by mid-summer. Is
Yes.
that timeline still on track, or are there changes that we know of?
No, at this point, I'll be on a phone call. I'm talking to General Perner tomorrow, and I'll just double check on that. But I know the governor was on a call with Senator Blunt last week, and you know, AstraZeneca has been approved in London, and our thoughts are is that it will be approved in February here in the United States. We've got the J&J coming on board too. So I appreciate your sensitivity that everything I say has a caveat to it that based on the best available data we have at this time. But I know Tony Fauci has said as recently as last week that we still hope that by June and July, every Missourian based on the 2 vaccines we have, a third one that we think will be on board, and possibly a fourth that wants to get a vaccine will be able to get a vaccine. And again, it's something Robert Nodell always says is, we will have enough vaccine for anybody in Missouri to get it. We firmly believe that. It just may take a little time to get to people, maybe a little slower than they'd like, but I can promise you this, is that when we get it out the door allotted, and we can't thank our partners enough for vaccinating people quickly.
Dr. Williams, is there right now, what do you need from the federal government to get a supply out faster to the public? Is it just a matter of getting more vaccines from Moderna and Pfizer? What more could be done to roll it out faster?
Yeah, as Adam Crumless says, that really is the rate limiting step now. I read other states who say they have these issues and that issues. New York's one that comes to mind, but we don't have those issues in Missouri. If we had 3 times as much vaccine, we would be able to get it out. So really, right now in Missouri, the rate limiting step is just simply that N of how much vaccine we get.
And is there anything that can be done from the federal government to get that, or does that all fall on Moderna and Pfizer to get it here?
I'll ask General Perner tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly. It's distributed purely pro rata by citizenship, and we're 2% of the population. So I keep telling people that whatever amount we're getting, it's 2% of the total amount available. But as far as transportation or those type of issues, that's just not the rate limiting step right now in Missouri.
Hi, Dr. Williams.
Hey, Philip.
Those 500 samples that the state lab looks at every day, do they come from all over the state?
They do, Philip. Thank you for asking. We think, I talked to Bill about it yesterday, we think it's fairly reflective of the eastern part, the western part, and so we feel pretty good about that as a sentinel. Should we have a variant here in Missouri, we think that we have a system in place that we pick it up pretty quick.
Thanks. The federal legislation that the president signed recently includes $8.75 billion
Yeah.
for vaccine distribution. $1 billion of that is supposed to be distributed to states within the first 21 days.
Right.
How do you envision Missouri using that money?
David, I don't know yet. I want to thank the governor and Senator Blunt. I know they were kind of pivotal, the governor here from Missouri, on advocating for that. It is a good question. Obviously, there are transitions in the administration that are going on. We've had some contact, and so that remains to be determined. But again, we're thankful for the money, thankful that it was earmarked for vaccine distribution, and thankful to Senator Blunt especially and the governor for advocating for that from all of us clinically and in public health.
Dr. Williams, I was bouncing off of Philip's question because I was wondering, those samples that you guys are testing every day, is it coming from a certain gender, a certain age? What are you looking at? Are you trying to look at all different ages and genders and cultures?
We check every test. Every test we get, no matter where it's from, whatever distribution, it's all the tests going to the state lab. We're checking for that variant. So I don't have a breakdown for you, but I'm pretty sure it's just representative of the other 15,000 tests we do every day in Missouri by our 26 labs doing them. So I really want to thank Bill for ramping that up so incredibly quickly. It gives me, I can tell you this, I was talking to Clay Dunnigan yesterday, a good friend of the governor and I, who we talk to every Saturday, and I think he was very, very reassured that we were on top of it, because you can imagine when they look at the experience in London, that would be something they would want to know about as soon as possible.
We'll take 2 more questions, Dr. Williams. Lucas, and then over here.
Hey, Lucas.
Doctor, what is the difficulty in getting this vaccine to family doctors and private practices at this point?
Yeah, Lucas, thank you for the question. It's mostly, as you might just imagine, logistical. To deliver 10,000 vaccines to Barnes-Jewish or 6,000 to Cox and Springfield, we just give the allotment, they get it. The people they're in the building, they come down, they make appointments. You don't have this Florida situation where there are lines around the building. Once you move out into non-institutional based people, which we are committed to do, it just becomes logistically involves more redistributing. Let's just take the Pfizer. It's 975 doses in an allocation. Well, if you're a family doctor in Sedalia, you don't need 975. You may just need 60. It's just a matter of logistics once you move beyond those centralized locations. Same thing for smaller hospitals. But we are incredibly committed to doing it. And the governor has made sure we're incredibly committed to doing it. Just because you're a family doctor in Worth County, you are still in 1A, and we're going to find you. If you're a nurse practitioner, we're going to find you and get you that vaccine.
So is this the hospital's responsibility then to set that all up?
Well, no, it is if you're hospital-based. But if you're not hospital-based, it's not the hospital's responsibility, although we are talking about maybe using them. But at that point, we really start getting into our FQHCs. The vaccinators themselves can get vaccine. You know, you heard the governor say how many providers have signed up. So if you are a family doc in Albany, Missouri, you can order 50 vaccines, especially with the Moderna, which comes in allocations of 100. So I don't want to tell you it's not more challenging, but I do want you to come away with a message that even though it's more challenging, that we are not going to let that stop us from making that happen, because the sooner we can get through 1A, we can move into 1B.
Dr. Williams, when the state gets more vaccine supply, is there any sort of concern in terms of having enough workers to actually carry out the vaccinations?
You know, I don't think so. I think one thing that's been incredibly inspiring is just the incredible enthusiasm we've gotten from our healthcare providers. And also, I just have to add parenthetically, their collegiality. They have been super about working together to share vaccine. That just because the Pfizer came in allocations of 975, we've been redistributing with their helps, going, look, could you help out a hospital over here that really didn't need that many, they needed 400, but it would mean the world to them to get their people vaccinated. And I can't think of anybody who's turned us down. They've been really great, so can't thank them enough.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Thanks, Kelly.
Governor Parson?
Hi, Governor. According to the independent investigation that you ordered, Chief Operating Officer Drew Erdman declined to be interviewed by investigators. Have you talked to him about that, and does that raise any concerns with you?
None. Nobody at the governor's office was doing interviews for that particular investigation. So there was no need at the time when we conducted that investigation to be interviewed on that. Once on the veterans homes, once we seen that there was a problem, we immediately stepped in to make sure that action was taken. And then we called for that investigation to come back.
But are you concerned that Drew wasn't declined to be interviewed by the independent investigators that the state hired?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, there was a report done on what's happened. I think everything's pretty well been reported in that report of what happened. No different than me or anybody else at the governor's office, of the operations of that.
Governor Parson, do you have a statement or anything you would like to say about what's going on in our nation's capital today?
Well, what I do know of it, so let me just say this. I haven't been watching that very closely because a lot of things are going on here. Let me just tell you this. Whether it was in the middle of this summer here in Missouri, whether it's in Washington, D.C., whether you've seen what happened at Josh Hawley's house last night with his wife, I am a law and order guy. I don't care what you present to be or cause you're under. You don't violate the law. There's rules and regulations, and you have to abide by them. That's what I do believe. No matter who you support, no matter what your politics are, you have to be responsible for your conduct. And I have not changed that from the riots we had here in St. Louis and Kansas City when people were violating the law, when people were trying to harass Josh Hawley's wife last night. That is uncalled for. When people storm the Capitol and violate the laws, if they're violating the law, that's not who we are.
So I suppose you kind of hit on it there at the end, Governor, but maybe to be more direct, are you disappointed to see what's going on at the Capitol, the way people are behaving there?
Again, I don't know what all's going on. All of my understanding is people went in the Capitol. They wasn't supposed to go in the Capitol, and were doing obstruction to what the Senate and the House was doing. That's what I know. But no, you shouldn't be doing that. No more than here. People don't have a right. People have a right to come in this building peacefully every day, but you don't have the right to come in here and do what you want to do.
Do you think that behavior was emboldened by the president telling people to come out to Washington, D.C. to protest what was going on, by others trying to object to the counting of electoral votes?
Absolutely not. And here's why I say that, is that anytime you've had gatherings in Washington, D.C., we've seen marches, we've seen different people go out there for a reason. Are they wrong to do that? No, everybody has a right to protest. I think when you try to attach on the political game, whether you try to blame the president or blame somebody else, my understanding is the president told him not to commit any crimes. So, but again, I haven't read any of the details of this. You by far know more about the details, what's going on up there right now than I do. So my point of it is, if they're doing things, if they're violating the law, don't do it. Go back outside, protest.
Governor Parson, does the state have any plans to post vaccine totals somewhere similar to how cases and deaths are reported?
Ask the question again, please.
Does the state have any plans to post vaccine totals on some sort of dashboard similar to how cases and deaths have been reported?
Well, if you're talking about vaccine, are we reporting how many we're doing or how we're doing that? Okay, one thing on the vaccine, and Dr. Williams, is my understanding of that's normally not an accurate daily representation of what's done, because it takes a while for that information to get in. So what you've seen today, like for example, there was a glitch at one of the organizations. It was 10,000 that simply got administered, it just didn't get recorded. So every day there's a little bit of a delay in what that actual number is. But I think that information is available all the time. My understanding is, I think we're saying how many people we do, but if there's any follow-up to, if I'm saying that wrong, we'll let you know for sure. But my understanding is they're keeping track of that vaccine. And we want to know too, because it's important for us to know what those numbers are and how that's going. And I think David asked a question a while ago on the vaccine about getting it administered, getting it out. If the federal government gives us more money, if they give more supplies. Look, we will use whatever resources I have to make sure that vaccine gets out there, whether that's the National Guard, what are the resources we have in state government to get that out there. We've partnered again with local communities. So, I hope that problem does come. I hope there's more vaccine than you can administer, and I hope there's funding to get it all done. I hope those things do occur, but that's our plan.
Governor, kind of to follow up on that, we've been getting inundated with questions from people on how can we find more information from the state about how many vaccines are coming to Missouri, where exactly they're going. Is there a plan to have a more up-to-date database? There's a great website you guys have put together, but it hasn't been really updated with weekly updates. Is that a plan?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. That plan's already we're acting on that plan now of how many health centers have the ability to do that, how many can take the vaccine. Again, we can check on getting that information out, but there's nothing wrong with that information. We know who the providers are out there that's doing. There's a lot of moving pieces to this, as you well know, but I think one of the questions, rural Missouri. Sometimes we have a tendency to think Walmart, pharmacies, local doctors, but there's a lot of areas in this state that doesn't have a pharmacy, that doesn't have a Walmart. So we've got to figure out how we're getting all that, and every day we're working on that. How do we provide those people that can't take 1,000 doses, at a time? So we're looking at that all the time, how to get that distributed to be able to do that. And then I think for the reporting side of it, we want people to know how many people that vaccine's going out there, where it's at, like if it's in rural Missouri, if it's in Kansas City or St. Louis, and population is going to drive some of that. And then I think the other thing, who's the most vulnerable? I think that's a difficult thing when you're trying to administer a program, who gets the vaccine, who don't. And if you say, for example, any group, you can name them, just anybody. Do you still have the problem, do you give a vaccine to a 30-year-old over a 60-year-old? And who's the most vulnerable to that? So this is a very challenging, complex issue to try to figure out how do you administer that, who gets it first, who don't. Because every day somebody's contacting the office saying, move me up on the list, I want to be first, I want to be above somebody else. And it's a very complex.
On that same note, is there any thought of some type of sign up? I mean, that people would say, hey, where can I sign up? I want to get the vaccine. I want to be alerted when my category is called.
Yeah, there's no doubt. We're working through that stuff right now. 1A is pretty easy to administer and to see who that is, the healthcare workers. We all know what that number is. We know how much is available. We're trying to get that done. Where this really becomes complicated when you get to phase 2, frankly, much more, because then you're talking hundreds of thousands of doses at a time. So I think that'll be revolving as we move forward. we're going to be adapting and make changes to that. Again, our whole goal is the quicker we can get that administered into people, the better off we all are. So that's the main objective right there.
Switching up conversation topics here with you. We're going to talk about special session. What do you want to see come out of this special session? We're hearing different things from all over. Press conference earlier this afternoon, we're talking about police reform, we're talking about education. What does Governor Parson want to see come out of the special session?
Well, I'm always afraid to say that because if they all know what I want, sometimes that works against me a little bit. Joking aside, the reality of it is I think you go back to some base fund. The COVID liability issue is a huge issue for our state. I think that's something that needs to be addressed early on. I think we got to go back to the workforce development pieces of this. We got to make sure we're getting people trained to go back in the workforce because we know a lot of jobs that people had before are not going to be there. You got to look at the education. You got to look at things like broadband again that we've talked a lot about. But we've really had our eyes open too to realize how important when you're trying to deliver health service, whether it's telemedicine, telehealth, education to our kids, how much we need to do more in those areas. So there's a lot of things that I think can be addressed, but I think the immediate thing that I'll be looking at in session is how do I help the people that need it the most right now? How do I get people back to work? How do I make sure that the healthcare system is strong and ready to move forward? And how do we educate these people to get them back in the workforce? So a lot of things fall into those categories, but I think those are the main things. I think the liability issue is a big issue. I think we're kidding ourselves. I'm terribly disappointed we didn't get that done in December in special session. It should have got done, but I think that has to be that. I think you got to go back to looking at infrastructure. I think we are thankful in this state during this whole pandemic we were keeping major projects going. The Buck O'Neill Bridge is still on schedule. The Rocheport Bridge still on schedule. One of the largest improvements on I-70 is still on schedule. So a lot of things going on, but there's a lot of issues out there. Wayfair is still out there. We got to do something. I think that's, if there's ever a time to really get serious and try to figure out solutions for that, now's the time. We see internet companies, I guess I want to see as they advertise now, buy from us, get away from taxes on the local levels in your states and things like that. That's disappointing news for our brick and mortar people and our mom and pop shops that got hit the worst in this. So I think that's something we need to look at.
I will take one final question, Phil.
Budget withholds have still not been released, and what do you think the prospects are of releasing them in the future?
Well, I think, I'm not sure what the exact amount was today, 100 and some odd million, I think, is what we did a total on that, but we're continually looking at that all the time to see when we can. Right now the revenues, look good in the state. We've been so fortunate here in this state. A 4.4 unemployment rate. I think we're in the top 10 in the recovery efforts. So again, by doing the balanced approach of keeping our businesses open, keeping people working, it's paying off for us in this state. Nobody had those answers back early in the spring, but I'm thankful we did what we did, and we got a lot of people going to work. So the economy looks, the revenues look good. I'm not saying they look great. We still got challenges. We don't know exactly what this is going to look like a year from now, but right now it's much better than we expected. That's why we're releasing a lot of the funding.
Off the top of your head, do you know how much has not been released yet? How much is still being withheld?
I don't. We'll be glad to get that. Kelly can get that information for you. We can tell you exactly what all this totaled up and how much is left in restrictions. I think one thing to keep in mind as you talk to restrictions, it's really important, especially for you in the media, to do that. Some of those restrictions that you may go in there and say, well, how come you didn't release this? It could have been backfilled through COVID, through the CARES Act. So some of that money could have been made whole through other avenues. So just to be clear on that, as you look through that, there could be things in there that we're not going to release funding on because we did it through the CARES Act. So, all right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.